Hello, welcome to this week's Forex Outlook here at xm.com. I'm Rafi Boyajan, currency analyst, and here with me is our chief economist, Michalis Florenjadis. So Michalis, it was a very big week for central banks. We also had some interesting moves in the currency markets. So tell us what happened so far this week.
I think what was very interesting about the previous week were the outsized gains of the Aussie and the Kiwi. There were some news for the Aussie and the Kiwi, but nothing like the major meetings of the central banks that we had for the other currencies. So it was a combination, I think, of dollar weakness. I think we had some good data out of Australia, like the employment numbers. We also had the proposal for a new RBNZ governor who is relatively liked by the market. He's seen as a steady hand. And what was more interesting was for the euro, the dollar, and the pound, where we had, in all these countries, we had central bank meetings. They were relatively little changed amongst each other by the end of the week. The Bank of England was seen as steady in policy. The ECB also they were a little dovish in their inflation forecast, in the long-term inflation forecast. And the Fed also reaffirmed the 3 hikes next year. They upgraded their growth forecasts, but the taxes are expected to have only a short-term influence on growth and nothing long-term. So it was very interesting, where it was the big week for central banks, but not a lot of volatility by the end of the week. And I think next week, Rafi, we have the last of the 4 major central banks, the Bank of Japan meeting. What can you tell us about that?
That's right. So the Bank of Japan will have its last policy meeting of the year. They're expected to hold their policy unchanged. But it could be interesting if there's a possibility we might see something different in their policy statement, in their announcement. There's been some talk in the markets that Bank of Japan is trying to signal to the market that they want an early exit from kiwi. Haruhiko Kuroda earlier in November had expressed some concerns about having continued flat yield curve and low interest rates in terms of the negative impacts that could cause. But now we're hearing that that's not the case, that the market's misinterpreted that communication. So there's a bit of a confusion there. So there is a possibility of a surprise, but the most likely scenario is that they will maintain their current stance. We're also going to have some GDP numbers out of New Zealand. You mentioned the Kiwi had a strong week. GDP, we could see a weaker growth in the third quarter, possibly due to negative impact from the dairy industry. But on the whole, it's unlikely to change the outlook for the New Zealand economy. But if you do see a weak number, that could potentially be a setback for the Kiwi. And then next up, we're going to have a whole bunch of data coming out of the United States. We're going to have the personal consumption expenditure report, which includes, of course, the core PCE price index. That's the Fed's preferred inflation measure. It's been stuck at 1.4% for the past couple of months, well below the Fed's 2% target. If we see that moving closer to 2%, that would be positive for the dollar. We're also going to have durable goods and the final GDP estimates for the third quarter. But most likely, once again, the focus will be on the tax plan. It is expected that next week both the House of Representatives and the US Senate will vote on the final version of the bill. We've been hearing some reports this week that several Republicans have been wavering in their support for the bill. Of course, we've got negotiations ongoing. We're likely to see further changes to that final version. But if there was to be any setback in terms of if they see that there's not going to be enough Republican support in the Senate and they postpone the vote, that could lead to further losses for the US dollar.
It was interesting to see that the US dollar did back off this week. It wasn't particularly strong because there are some doubts about the tax plan. So it's going to be interesting what is going to happen definitely on that front. With the Bank of Japan, I would also say that if not now, then when will the Bank of Japan maybe try to limit the stimulus that is injecting in the markets? Because Japanese data have overall been coming out fairly strong. So I think there is a good economic developments there in line with the withdrawal of some stimulus. Of course, we have a lot of people in Japan dependent on a weak yen, so politically that may not play out very well. And with New Zealand, maybe I think that the kiwi has been at relatively low levels. It will be interesting to see whether it's more of a dead cat bounce, the rise we saw there this week in excess of 2%, or whether there are more long-term developments or a more durable recovery that is going to lead kiwi higher. So a lot to watch as markets are winding down to the Christmas period, which is traditionally a quiet one. Thank you very much, Rafi. Thank you everyone for watching and have a great day.